few Americans regularly use social justice terms such as anti-racism and toxic masculinity. You don't say. Very few people across the world actually utilize these terms, but this is still a very interesting little article here from YouGov US, which shows not only that the people who do use these terms are a vanishingly tiny minority, comparable to the ones who have never even heard about it, or even indeed inferior on certain occasions, but it also goes some distance to demonstrate that the two parties, Democrats and Republicans, don't merely exist in different realities, they do not even speak the same language anymore. Especially seeing as, safe space, for example, when a Republican uses the term safe space, more likely than not, he is doing so to mock the idea rather than talk about it in a positive manner, or suggest it as something that the Republicans too should adapt. This is rather interesting, because we've already known this to a certain degree, absolutely, but to see it on numbers, on paper, really hammers home the point that this has in essence become the language of the elites, the aristocratic nobility. They have separated themselves from the simple peasantry via a barrier of verbiage. And this is, of course, very, very common throughout the entirety of human history, where those who believe themselves to be better than others will find some way to subtly remind their inferiors of that very inferiority. A secret language shared only by the chosen few. We can see examples of this in Latin, for example, which was for a very long time the language of the educated elites, and knowing Latin was a sign that you were a member of the club. Or, whilst it may sound a little silly today, there was a time when any debate about military matters had to be conducted in French, because the French were considered the leading authority on matters of military science and the arts of combat. These days, I suspect the Germans might have a superior claim, but that was how it was for a very long time. And this, of course, creates the air of mysticism. You are speaking about something special, something unique and mystical, magical even, that mere low-born ruffians could never truly understand. And this has also evolved in forms of dialects or not languages, what's the word I'm looking for? Accents, there you go. As, again, there are many ways to remind your inferiors that they are indeed inferior. But to return to the article here. Some observers have suggested that Democrats' approach to social justice issues, and more particularly the language surrounding them, is at least partially responsible for Donald Trump's win against Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential election. But how familiar are Americans with this type of terminology, the woke terminology, which has been classified at various points as woke, politically correct, social justice-oriented, or related to diversity, equity, and inclusion? In a new survey, we investigated this question, asking Americans whether they use, know about, or have heard of 30 social justice-oriented terms. Many of them are relatively new and associated with current political movements, and some older, though still parts of certain kinds of political discourse. Okay, so most of these are actually fairly old, well, in immediate politics terms anyways. In terms of overall politics, yeah, the majority of these are very new. Safe space, new. Woke, new. Anti-racism, new. Environmental justice, new. Patriarchy, old, but you get the drift. So that's okay. So safe space is at the top, regularly used by 20% of people. 56% have heard of it and they claim to know what it is, but they don't use it regularly. 14% have heard of it but don't know what it is, and 10% says they've never heard of it. Now, I will immediately hasten to add as well that this 56% slice that number in half immediately, as I guarantee you the majority of people, and this kind of reinforces the previous point, don't actually know what is meant by a safe space. They will probably know the bare bones basic of it. The idea of, oh, what is a safe space? Oh, that's where you can go and speak your mind, right? Nobody can criticize you. That's what it is. It's my best American accent. It's pretty terrible, I know, but give me a break here. That's, of course, not actually the case. Safe space is a struggle session, in essence. It is where the correct political ideology is allowed to say whatever it wants to the incorrect political ideology with the protection of the moderator. It is a safe space for left-wing values, not for all values, not for all points of view, but specifically for their values. This is where, I'm sure many of you have seen the meme of the black girl going like, how do you explain that the shaman calls the lightning? And the white kid goes, he isn't. And the teacher then steps in and goes, shh, this is a safe space, no questioning the shaman calling the lightning. It's an extreme example, but it is very much so how that works. Or white privilege. Again, 64% of people say they know what white privilege is. Oh, I guarantee you, you have no idea. Not to the extent of it. White privilege is original sin, and because it is a sin, something intrinsically evil, anything can be done in order to alleviate this sin or to rectify it. Let's give a look at a beautiful example. So, one of the original thought leaders of this, now somewhat infamous and debunked, was Ibram X. Kendi. Defines what it means to be an anti-racist. Well, there's a fair bit of waffling here, but the part that he got utterly burned for was this. The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. In other words, the only remedy to discrimination against black people is discrimination against white people. That is the literal meaning of this. That is the effect of it. It is, well, in essence, two wrongs will surely make a right. Huh? Well, no. They're not quite that naive about it. They understand that what this does is justify discrimination for a good cause. It is Gibbs. It is treat me special because of the way I look. That is what it all boils down to, but it's fine because you are the one with original sin. You are the one who have been painted the wrong colors, and therefore what I do towards you is not evil, it is justice. That is the thing. Even the 64% here, again, can be cut in half easily. But then look at this, like neurodiversity, schizo nonsense. 31% claim to know it, 20% have heard of it but don't know what it is, 40% have never heard of it, 53% have never heard of BIPOC. Really? I kind of like BIPOC, honestly. It's got a nice negative cling to it. Or lived experience, 25% have never heard about lived experience. 42, emotional labor, God, that's a bit of a derpy one. Or ableism, 48%. It's sometimes nice to have a reminder for even those on my side of the political bubble that what we often view as rather normal is actually not particularly normal at all. The very fact that you got like 52% doesn't know what heteronormativity means, for example, that makes me rather pleased, frankly, because I, unfortunately, knows what that means. Cisgendered heteronormativity and so on. The reinforcement of heteronormative standards. The idea that being straight is not only the ideal, but the de facto standard, whereas the left, of course, doesn't want that. They want some form of queer fairyhood to be the standard, or more correctly, probably, to abolish anything like a standard and embrace the idea of chaos, in essence. Yeah, wokeism really is kind of a chaos cult. But the fact that so many people have no idea what this nonsense is, it's actually very positive. It means that the market penetration of progressive ideas are a lot less than we had thought. And hell, we've always basically argued on my side here that we represent the silent majority, in essence. Just as our opponents have claimed the exact same things. This has been the debate, as I've repeated again and again. Politics is the 2% arguing over the 98. We claim that we are not a loud minority, we are the silent majority, whereas the left has done the exact same thing, claiming we are not a loud minority, we are the silent majority, and so on. And This demonstrates once and for all, in my opinion, that we have won, again, that argument. Undoubtedly. And the fact that this has divided so sharply along political lines as well indicates that you have an entire party that has dedicated itself to the vanishingly tiny minority of the population. Like, any Democrat that looks at this should have like a, oh, shit moment. Any corporation that looks like this should have an oh shit moment. What do you mean we've targeted 20% of the population at best, whilst leaving 56% ambivalent, 14% completely uninformed, and 10% is like, wow, you speaking English? Or worse still, like, we hit 52, 53, and 53% on this nonsense. These are the demographics that Disney has targeted. These are the demographics that Blizzard has targeted. These are the demographics that EA, Microsoft, Google, Amazon have all targeted. This percentage right here. Because they were told that this was the majority. They were told that this was most people, that most people shared their values. That has now been quite thoroughly disproven. But the Democrats, well, they just gobble that down hook, line, and sinker. This is the Disney position, where the majority will actually look at it and use it regularly, where they will look at it and understand it, or at the very least believe they understand it. And again, it isn't the majority. The other political party seems to in fact be claiming that majority simply by not engaging with the language of the elite. And when we finally look at the breakdown by things like college education and whites here as well, so red, I believe, means that they haven't heard of it, just like up here, so the color coding, haven't heard of it, and so on. Black, for example, 30%. Who I say I regularly... No, there we go. What is your familiar with the following term? Percentage who says I regularly use it. Okay, so majority here. US adult citizen, 20%. Aged 18 to 44, 26%. 18 ages 45 plus, 15%. Non-college graduate, 18. Even the college graduate are 24%. And blacks, 30%. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised by that. I am and I am not. On the one hand, I am surprised by the fact that this is a more common thing in the black community than in the white one. But on the other hand, the black community also vote far more Democrat, and is so more likely to probably lean into their public political positions, I guess. That one actually surprised me. And what was it? I think we've got Latinx here. Yeah, there we go. Latinx. Look at those numbers. 6%, 11%, 4%. Again, all of the corporations, like the Democrats in particular, need to be looking at this and realizing, holy crap, at the very best, we have targeted 20% of the population. At the very best, we have targeted like 30% of blacks. These are doomsday numbers for the industry, which should now realize that they have been doing what we've been telling them all along, targeting the minority over the majority. There is no woke audience out there. There is no horde of progressive fans ready to leap to your defense or finally consume your product. You were the minority. You've always been the minority. And the harder you push this nonsense and the more people begin to actually realize what it means, the smaller a minority you will become. There is only one way, and again, this is after decades of public propaganda. This is after decades of being in full control of the levers of political power. This is after decades of propaganda, of commercializing, of all the major entertainment companies dancing to their every whim. And still, they are such a vanishingly small percentage. What else is there to say? I mean, this really should be picked up on by first and foremost the Democrats, which will very quickly understand what they've gone so terribly wrong with, whether or not they will be able to rip themselves loose of their ideologues. However, I don't think so. There are far too many people who are not merely ideologically, but economically have vested interests in continuing to see this forward. And of course, the natural, how do we put it, the self-protective instinct. When most people realize that they've made a major mistake, their first natural human reaction is to try and go no, that can't be right. As a natural defense mechanism to protect their own ego. And by that I don't mean ego as in self-confidence, I mean sense of self in all your literal interpretation. And so, even when they see these numbers, they will probably first think, okay, well, the problem isn't the message, the problem is that we haven't pushed the message enough. That will be the first conclusion, that we simply haven't explained it enough. Or they will look at I know it is but don't regularly use it and simply think, okay, well we just need to convince that group. We just need to make them understand why they need to use our language. We need to say, hey, you can be a part of the club too. You can enter into the academic understanding. If only, of course, you're willing to submit to a few minor presumptions and presuppositions. As they say, true power isn't getting somebody to say something they know to be true. True power is getting somebody to say something they know to be false. That has kind of been the litmus test of wokeism for all these long years, and it's kind of failed, hasn't it? A very interesting thing, a very interesting little poll here. Now, of course, there's the usual caveats with polls, the usual data error gathering, the usual underrepresentation of all the people of America and so on, and across the world, blah, 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 blah. But it does give a very cool little indication of the majority, doesn't it? Because this is probably vaguely representative. It seems to conform to reality as I've seen it, anyways. And granted, I could simply just be reinforcing my own biases by saying that, but considering the current swing in the political landscape, I don't think so. I'm fairly confident that we were indeed always the majority we thought ourselves to be. Happy news. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.